What's up, guys? I'm flying solo today. I am interviewing our coach, Cody Jefferson of Embrace the Lion, and you don't want to miss this one. If you're a dude, we talk about all dude things, right? And we especially take a deep dive into mental health and how important that is for us guys. We think we can do it alone, but we can't, y'all. So check this episode out. I promise you'll like it. Cody, what's up, my man? How's it going, brother?
What's going on, man? It's going really well. How are you doing?
It's good. It's good. It's good to see you. We got some good weather here out in Seattle. I've been taking the kids snowboarding lately, which is super cool, and it's just super exciting. So, just a little.
Is snow good weather?
Snow good weather?
Is snow good weather?
Oh yeah. It is for me. Yeah.
And, okay. Well, Oklahoma, like that's if it's snow, that means that everything is shut down. So because we don't know what to do with our minds.
No, that's how it was growing up in South Carolina. It's like, okay, if you see one flake, milk gone, bread gone, and nobody goes anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But out here,
it's like March 2020, just nothing's on the shelves.
Yeah. And it's super trippy. But yeah, snow up in the high mountains, that's good weather. We got 4-wheel drive, we're good to go. But so just to give our listeners a little backstory. So Cody has been on the show before. I think you were on season 1 a long time ago when we first started hanging out. It was like 4 years ago, I think. And Cody has been our coach, mine and Melanie's coach. So when we talk about coaching, this is the dude that we're talking about. Cody's a high-performance marriage coach. Why don't I let you tell who you are to our listeners?
Yeah, so sure. Cody Jefferson. So I've been in the space for about 4.5 years now. The tagline would just be helping good men become great and helping great men create movements. And so over the past 4.5 years, have created a community of just over 4,100 guys. We focus on 4 pillars: head, heart, health, habits, how you treat your mindset, how you treat your relationships with yourself, with others. And I'm a believer, former pastor of 13 years. So relationship with God, how you treat your body, and then how you treat your time. Typically time is reflective of business. I typically work with CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders, coaches, consultants, speakers, pastors, right? And helping again create a robust interpersonal value so that we can then increase enterprise value or company corporate value. So it's been great, man. If I'm not here jamming out behind a desk, leading and walking with people, I'm typically on the road speaking. So
awesome. And I know your speaking circuit is like ramped up now that COVID has kind of died down a little bit.
Yes.
Sounds like you're a pretty busy dude going on, huh?
Dude, it's been great. It's been great. We fortunate to have been really, really busy. And I'd say that really intentional. So it's great.
Right on.
Yeah.
One of the things, and we're going to just kind of jump around anywhere here.
Let's go.
I'm liking to do this series with just me because we're talking to dudes and women too. Of course, women can get value to this, but I really find being in this space for guys, at least our demographic, which, from 24 to maybe 44 or whatever. It's like, guys, we hear things differently when we hear other dudes say it. You know what I'm saying? And one of my favorite sayings is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, kind of thing. Totally. Melanie has told me things 100 times, and I hear it from our coach, like from you or some other podcaster dude. I'm like, wait a minute. Did you hear that? And Melanie's like, yeah, I've been telling you for 5 years. What? There's a power in men speaking to men. So just tell us a little bit about where that has shown up for you in your life, because I know that you've done coaching too. And who are some men that have kind of impacted you in that way? That's like, I needed to hear that.
Oh, that's really great. So, and we can take this from a lot of different frames. And it's, there's a healing that happens and reconciliation that happens when a man creates a trust and an equity with another, right? Because for so many of us, there's been some sort of, and you can speak into this far more eloquently than I can, being a therapist, but there's a wounding that happens between men, especially between fathers and sons, and there's a reconciliation that often doesn't ever happen. And so often we find ourselves in patterns and in cycles that aren't necessarily useful. They're not necessarily healthy, but they're what we've always known. And so they're familiar. And so the brain just loves patterns. On the backside of that, then we get addicted to this idea of performance and accolade, because in the back of our mind, in some way, shape, or form, we're just trying to make somebody proud of us. And typically who we're trying to make proud of us is a parent that we never got that affirmation from.
Right.
And so when we can heal that with a powerful, authoritative guy that we trust, that can also on the backside of that show us empathy, understanding, care, and compassion, like we find a real winning scenario there. So guys that have been really, really instrumental in my journey. Obviously, my grandfather, obviously, my dad. There are pastors in my life that have been absolutely instrumental, more forward facing to where I'm at now. The guys in my life, I've got a very small circle of incredibly close friends, most of them out, in Newport Beach, who hold me radically accountable to the man that I say that I am and to the man that I say that I'm going to be. And it's not so that I can collect trophies. It's not to collect accolades. It's not because we all have this competition about who's going to make the most or be the most or give the most. It's because we recognize there's a potential in us. And so when you walk alongside men, when I walk alongside men, it's to call out the best in them. And sometimes that means that we have to be a bit triggering sometimes, but then on the backside of that, we understand there's a safety. So like guys that I would highlight that have been instrumental, both directly and indirectly. Guys who've been on the show, guys like Ryan Mickler, right? Some of my close friends, Garrett J. White, who runs Wake Up Warrior, Keith Yackey, who is one of my best friends, guys like Mark Lack, who have been so instrumental in helping me build the brand that I have and help me understand proper marketing. These guys are foundational because they not only walk the walk in business, but they walk the walk in their lives and in their personal lives. And so that's really important to me. So again, there's something about being seen, but there's something deeper about being known. And when men can experience the vulnerability of being known so that it can call out their greatness, something really magic happens. And we're able to step more into our masculinity in that way.
Yeah, man, I'm having so many thoughts of like, oh, I'm going to go that direction and this direction. But so yeah, you mentioned, obviously our listeners know I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've also done therapy, right? Anything from CBT, cognitive behavioral stuff, to DBT, and to EMDR, which we talked a little bit about that on the show, and mix all that stuff with the power of healing with other men from maybe something that we didn't get from the men in our life growing up or something is so freaking powerful. And it is almost like, hey, you have permission. You're okay. I've been there before. Let me help you with that, right?
Well, yeah.
And, with some of our clients, therapy and with coaching, I do this practice called reparenting, right? And it's a whole long thing. I'm not going to get into it, but the idea is, okay, me as a man, right, knows exactly what the 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old boy Seth needs to hear, right? So you kind of go into this like trippy, you get like super quiet and you're very like in your brain, right? And you go, okay, the adult me, the grown ass me, right? The man here is going to speak to the 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid and say, no, you got this. I know exactly how you feel. I remember that. And then it's like you're reaching back in time and pulling that little boy or whatever back up. And like, when you come out of that, I swear it is so powerful. And I even get excited, like all the men that I've done that with, just bawling, crying.
I would love to share a story of how that actually happened to me recently.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. So I was on a trip, just a little mini vacation with my son and his mom and her husband. So like I vacation with my co-parents, like we're best friends. People think it's odd. It works for us. We love it.
It's good modeling.
Yeah. And so anyways, at the end of every day of the trip, we're taking a shuttle back to our hotel, and my son, who is 6, will climb up in my arms and he just falls asleep because he's just so tired because we go so hard. And that week before in therapy, so I go to therapy every single week, right? So I have high performance coaches, I have mentors, and I have a therapist. And my therapist is a woman, and we can even chat about why that's been so powerful. But at any rate, we're walking through this scenario of when I was around 6 or 7, and I had a parent who was just really emotionally unstable, and there was a lot of suicidal ideations and romanticizing and conversations just almost every day. And I was always the one who was holding everything together. Like he couldn't not be okay. Like I was always the one that had to make sure that everything was okay, which now years down the road, obviously is why I identify as a 3-wing 2 on the Enneagram and why I'm a performer. And we can dive into all of that. So she asks me, my therapist asked me, like, what did you need in that moment? I said, I just needed to secure the situation. I need to make sure everything was okay. She said, no, but like, no, what did you actually need? And I'm like, no, that's what I needed. I needed to make sure everything was okay. I couldn't get there. And she's like, Cody, what did 6-year-old Cody need? Go back there. And I lost it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I probably just needed what I was giving, which was just somebody to hold me and say, it's okay.
Right.
Fast forward, like 4 days later, I'm with my son. I'm holding him. He's sleeping. I was never really held as a child. Like that wasn't a frame for me growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very affectionate with my son, recognizing that wasn't a thing for me. So I am that way. And it was so weird, Seth. Like in that moment, I was like out of myself, and I recognized that I was the 6-year-old that was my son.
Right.
And I was holding him, but I was comforting myself. Dude, I lost it.
Yeah.
Like my son's mom actually took a picture of it because it was just such a life-changing experience for me. So everything you're saying, like it's hitting me in a different way. Cause I'm like, dude, I literally just experienced that.
Yeah. And
it's wild.
It's so, I mean, even I didn't really learn about this in grad school therapy and stuff. It was, years later.
Yeah.
And having experienced it myself, and then being able to walk through other men and also women that have done that with several women, just the power. And when you say like out of body experience, it is like, obviously there's no like drugs or anything,
Right, sure.
trippy psychedelics things going on, but just the power of the mind to do that. Like, okay, it's like you're two people in one. I'm the current man, and then that kid right now.
Yes.
And it's just amazing. Right.
Yeah.
And, I know we've talked about EMDR and the power of that, and EMDR is really helpful in rewiring some of those pathways, right? Because we get so caught up, whether it's trauma or just other maladaptive reactions or behavior, was like, oh, this is our rut, right? And we always go to what we know. So EMDR was really invaluable for me to blow up those ruts, right?
Absolutely.
And walk differently.
It was I went deep fast, right? We can make some jokes about that, but
and done.
Yeah, and we're done. But I just went in because I recognized, like, if this is going to help heal some things, like, let's just go. And dude, it was a shit show. It was so messy. And what I'm finding now, interestingly enough, on the backside of that, and now doing like talk therapy and other kind of behavioral therapies, what I'm finding most fascinating now, having a therapist who she's got more degrees than I've got excuses. And she's so intelligent. So now getting to really marry like the logic and the intellect of, now that you know what you know, now let's look at why the brain does why it does. Let's look at all of the adaptive states. Let's look at sympathetic and parasympathetic. Like, let's look at all of these ways in which we can now create new paradigms. And that, I'm like geeking out over all of that, because now I can take all of that and I can use that. Right.
And you can leverage that to literally do anything you want to.
At 100%.
Right.
100%.
And with our coaching clients and with, just people we talk to, I'm like, you know what, we really can do this. You got it. It's an upper limit problem or whatever you want to call it, self-sabotaging. It's with enough work and with enough time and consistency in the same direction, you actually can get there. Right. And if I could just shake people and say, bro, okay, for real, you can. Right. And sometimes I have to shake myself. And so there's a power to that. When I have gotten my ass handed to me by my coach, right, i.e. you, or one of the other most powerful times where I just got ripped to a new one, which was great, by the way. Don't be scared of it if you're scared of it. Was we were in therapy, me and Melanie, when we were going through the terrible time, obviously, that we had. And he looked at me and said, and this is an adult guy, right? Successful, is like a grandpa. I had utmost respect for him. That's number one. You have to respect the people you're working with, or else it won't work, right? And he just looked at me square in the eye and said, Seth, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I was like, oh God. I didn't have an answer. And it was that moment. It was like, okay, change, boom. Right. And there's been times when during our coaching process, when you've asked the same question, not verbatim, of course, but like, bro, wait, what? Right. And then there's also times where and I think I've told you this before in past coaching sessions, but you said, because we were talking about like my upper limit problems and stuff like that. And you're like, Seth, if you don't build this empire of a marriage podcast and this coaching business and all this other stuff, somebody else will.
Why not you?
If you don't do it, somebody else will.
Yeah. I mean, really, the only frame is like, who's going to be committed longer? Who's going to be committed to growth longer? I think, especially for the guys that are listening, like we carry so much shame and guilt around ideas and around frames of the past. Mm-hmm. Your life may have been a train wreck. You may feel like a train wreck now. You may have had a really, really torrential history. You may have made some really, really big mistakes. Okay. But we can't move into a frame of the future so long as we're focused on a paradigm of the past, right? Mm-hmm. Like everything happens through the portal of the present. I was a pastor. Everything's alliteration, apparently. And so, but like everything happens through the present. And so many guys, we're so hung up on ideas that don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And we're so afraid of what could actually happen and who we'd have to become based on those stories, right? So we just stall and we have this upper limit. We have this glass ceiling that we won't break through. Mm-hmm. And some of it is because of who we've been, but some of it is like, we don't want to confront who it's going to require us to become.
Yeah, because what's that going to expose? Like, especially if we have a shame narrative, we're going to go, oh shit, right. Well, if I try to do this, it'll just shed light on all these years when I've just not been doing stuff, right? Sure. And then we feel guilty or shame around that. But
it doesn't exist.
Right. And you said the power is in the present. And, I've been reading some Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now and all this stuff. And honestly, if you get really deep into that stuff, it makes so much sense because the past, it's clearly done. In fact, it isn't there, right? It's non-existent except for just memories, right? And then the future.
And those are all biased, Seth. All of those memories serve as a confirmation bias to confirm the suspicions of where you are today. Your past isn't real. Your past is only a confirmation of what you choose for it to mean. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah,
That's why you can tell me yours. Yeah.
So just speak on that because I'm thinking of coaching clients and other folks we talk to is like, oh, I failed that one time, so I'm not going to do anything again. But like the power of confirmation bias is so strong and it holds so many people back. But just talk briefly on how that impacts you and how you talk to your clients about that.
Yeah, so we can look at failure as shame, condemnation, guilt, right? And so, especially for those of us that were raised in the context of a spiritual upbringing in the church, right? Like that is what, like anything in our past that was, it's all something we have to be reconciled from, right? But if you can look at failure as feedback, right? That it doesn't make you good, bad, or indifferent. Like if we can look at something, we can say, man, you know what? I was a real shit show in that relationship. Mm-hmm. But with the frame of my mentality, knowing what I knew, not understanding my triggers, my coping mechanisms, my unhealthy codependency, like not knowing all of the baggage and weight that I was carrying into it that I now know now, how can I have guilt around a person that doesn't exist anymore? Mm-hmm. All I can do is move forward. So if we look at failure as feedback, not as a definition or an assignment, well, then we can remove its power to hold us hostage, right? Because the ego is the ego, the shadow self, we can call it, is the one who wants to hide, prove, and protect, right? But then Richard Rohr, right? Mm-hmm. Richard Rohr, who is this theologian, says that true spiritual contentment is when there is nothing to hide, prove, or protect.
Right.
So when we can look at this and say, okay, this didn't work. I mean, even in business, this didn't work. That doesn't mean I'm a failure. That just means this didn't work. So my son and I read this book. It's called Going on a Bear Hunt, right? You can't go over it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. You have to go through it.
Right.
And sometimes our greatest failures are actually our greatest teachers because they're teaching us, one, what we will accept, what we won't accept, what does work, what doesn't work in the season. And it gives us a frame of how to move forward. So when we can remove the shame and guilt associated with failure and understand, give ourselves a break to say, this is all feedback. Like, can I come into this situation as a learner, that this is teaching me something in relationships, right? Like when we miss it in a relationship, that doesn't make you a failure. The problem comes in when our partner, who is carrying their own wounds and baggage and assignments as well, like labels as a failure.
Right.
Well, I might have missed something here, but like, can we look at where I am, where you are? Can we look at our histories, our traumas? And as men, we don't like to talk like that. It's not a language we really use, but once you get into this whole world, it's a language you use all the time.
Right.
Right. So, okay, how are we, like, what led us to this place? Like, okay, was there unhealthy codependency? Were we trauma bonding? Like, what's happening? Not because we're failures. We failed here. This sucked. How do we learn from this? So when you can remove the idea that you're a failure and just look at failure as feedback, you give yourself permission to move forward into power.
Yeah. Even that phrase, let's all look at failure as feedback. And I'm thinking of other phrases. What we resist will persist.
Yeah.
And the lessons, all the greatest lessons I've learned, getting punched in the face, failing my licensure exam 3 times, like buying a house at a wrong time. If I'd have gone, oh, okay, well, I'm not meant to be a therapist, or like, she punched me in the face, didn't think that'd happen, we're getting divorced, or like, okay, never going to buy a house again, just whatever, rent, then I'd be in a much, much different position than I am now, right? So I wanted listeners to actually think about, hey, that super shitty thing that you and your wife keep on arguing about over and over and over, don't even think about what she's doing or not doing. I want you to think about how you are showing up. Like you said, okay, what are some triggers? Are we trauma bonding? All this stuff. Attachment styles. Attachment styles are huge. Family of origin. You know this. We talk about it all the time. Oh, I learned how to be, a douchebag husband because my dad was the worst, or whatever. Or like, I'm only critical because that's all my mom ever talked to, or how my mom talked to my dad. So we have to be willing to look at all of that stuff. And
totally. Well, and Seth, I was, I grew up in an experience where in one of the houses that I was raised in, like, suicidal ideation was, that's the way that stress was coped with. Right. That was just common conversation. I'll just kill myself. I'm just going to kill myself. Right. Like, that was everyday language. So I didn't recognize that it wasn't normal. So when I would experience great bouts of stress in my adult life, that would be my go-to. I'm just going to kill myself.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I started to recognize how traumatic that was to people who didn't grow up like I grew up, right? Not to say like how I grew up was bad or anything else. There were just some experiences that were less than healthy, right? And so we have to take the good with the like perceptively bad. We have to, again, my parents aren't failures. The experience wasn't failing me. Like, there was some failure in there. So I use it as feedback. Okay, this actually isn't healthy at all. This is actually really, really detrimental. But the problem with pain and the problem with trauma is if we don't transform it, we transmit it. It was transmitted to me. And so I normalized it and I started to make it part of my experience. It wasn't until I then went to therapy, understood that it wasn't normal and that I actually could eradicate it from my own person and from my own behavior and from the ways in which I coped, and that I could develop healthy ways in which to cope and treat my own anxiety, frustration, and whatever it might be. Well, now I've transformed it and it doesn't get transmitted to my son.
Right. You're not handing it down, right?
I'm not passing it on.
It's
a trauma he doesn't ever have to experience.
Right. What a gift that we can give to our kids.
This is why we do the work.
Exactly. Right. And me and Melanie, we say, you or parents out there are creating the family of origin of your kids right now.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? Are you saying things like maybe one of your parents said, are we drinking? Are we like doing all this other stuff? Because then they're going to have to go to therapy for it, or maybe not, and just like suffer for it. So I love that. If we don't transform it, we'll transmit it. That's really good. Now I want to like kind of jump back here for a minute. So I know that you were a pastor, right? Maybe our listeners don't, but I know you're a pastor for, 15 years or so.
13. Yeah.
13 years. And then you burn out. You had all these health issues that just was like, okay, boom, I'm dying here. Literally. Like you're dying, right?
Literally. Yeah.
Right. And then I think we maybe have at least a similar experience in that. Like, I grew up Christian, in the church and all that stuff, and then moved out to Seattle and was still Christian. Me and Melly were very active in the church, but then stuff just kind of blew up. And I was like, what is this? What is the church kind of? So, I got to a point, I was like, whatever. I don't even know. I don't want to say walk away from the church, but what was your experience in that? Because over these last 4 years, I've seen you kind of like, hey, you know, whatever, or maybe you weren't as vocal, but you're now kind of going back, like, yep,
Yeah.
prayer, believing, all that stuff. Tell me about that.
So I got involved in ministry when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
And I got involved not because there was like some huge call on my life and I had been committed to the Lord for my entire life. And it was like a season that there was like a dream that I had that was prophetic. And so I walked into this white light. It wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a church and a pastor saw something in me, right? He saw the potential in me. He saw that I was really good on stage. He saw that I had a particular look about me. He saw that I could speak well and I could play music well, and gave me a platform. I am grateful. I would not be where I'm at without it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was I didn't have any maturity about me. And all I knew was I'm only as good as my last performance. You know, charismatic mega church, that was the frame and that was the experience. And so everything is very, very performance driven. And I got really, really addicted to being the best in the room. Again, 3-wing-2, ENFJ, through and through. That's me. I am the guy that is so good at wearing a mask that I didn't know who I was without it. I never matured to know. I mean, listen, I was studying theology academically. I was doing everything I could to prove to everyone that I belonged where I was, because deep down, I didn't feel like I did, because I never felt good enough. I never felt like I was worthy of it. I didn't feel like I came from the right, like, home life. I didn't feel like I came from the right background. I didn't feel like my personality, like there was so much dissonance and so much internal angst and frustration that I didn't, like, I knew what to say, right? And it wasn't that I didn't believe, I did. Like, I loved what I was doing, but I didn't have the seasoning. I didn't have the maturity. I'm not a robot, but kind of like I was just the product of my environment, and I was good at it until it almost killed me. So then I stepped out of occupational ministry back in 2017. And bro, I went so far to the other side simply because I was so hurt and pissed.
Right.
I didn't have the accountability. I didn't have it. And that's not the church's fault. It's not an indictment or anything else. Like I was just so good at wearing a mask that nobody knew anything was wrong.
Right.
And I didn't even know how to let accountability into my life, because I felt like, as somebody in ministry, everything had to be perfect all the time. And so I was just hurt, man. I was hurt. I was frustrated. I felt like all of my identity had been stripped. Like I had been a pastor since I was 19, right? I had been in occupational ministry since 19. And then I wasn't. I went through my first divorce when I was in ministry. So then I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a full-time dad, and then I wasn't a full-time dad anymore. And so like everything was gone. But dude, I prayed the right prayers. I tithed. I went on mission trips. I was the first one in and the last one out. Like, God, what the actual hell? Right? In the midst of my divorce, I lost several family members and friends to various unrelated tragedies that were absolutely horrific. Right? In the midst of that, I go septic because, again, I'm leading all these funerals, being all things to all people, wondering, God, what in the hell? Like, I'm doing everything. Like, what kind of weird Job test is this?
Right.
And so when I stepped out, I was just done. I was like, dude, I'm out. Like, if that's faith, like,
forget it.
I'm out. I am out. I literally almost like sacrificed my soul, my sanity, and my life on the altar of this ministry. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I went on a journey, and dude, I mean, I went like woo for a while, and like contemplative spirituality and new age. And like, I started reading books for myself, not because I was trying to ace an apologetics test on why Christianity was right.
Right.
And so I just removed all of the need to be right and all of the need to prove and protect things. And I was just like, I don't even know. I don't even care anymore. Like, whatever you believe is fine. And through the course of that, I started, the frustration started to loosen a little bit. And I started recognizing, again, through therapy, that maybe this wasn't actually God at all. Maybe this was just my own patterns and insecurities and triggers and all of the ways in which I've been conditioned to show up because of my personality type, which was based off of a series of events that have been ongoing for my entire life. And maybe if I could work on those things, maybe there could be some reconciliation, because of all the stories that I read, like the Jesus story made the most sense to me. Now, I'm not a biblical literist. I've never been a biblical literalist. it's not my frame. Like we're not going to get into like proof texting and scripture. Like we're not going to get onto all that because like you can be right. I don't care. I literally could care less 6 days, 6,000 years, 6 billion years. I don't care. Mm-hmm. What I care about is the way that a man lived his life. And I care about the way that that frames my context of humanity and spirituality and beginning and end, alpha, omega, and eternity, and a kingdom mindset of bearing the kingdom now on earth as it is in heaven. Mm-hmm. You know, that I can get into, right? And I found my way back into the church probably about 1.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And of all of the communities, I found myself back at a church that I'd never attended before that was pastored by a dear friend of mine who went through trauma at the same time that I did. He lost his father. His father was the pastor of this church, and then he took it over. Mm-hmm. His mom took it over for a season, and then he stepped into the reins. And there was just something so kindred about him and how he was like leading with a limp through all of this. And he wasn't trying to be perfect or polished, and it didn't feel like it needed to be that. Mm-hmm. And there was something that was like, all right, like this I can link arms with. Like you understand pain, and you understand trauma, and you understand that like we're all just trying to figure this out. I can get behind, I can get with that.
Yeah. How did that feel when like when you walked away from stuff? Like, okay, whatever, like, you know, not like what you were doing, but maybe because it feels like there was a lot less pressure, and for maybe the first time in your life, you were actually
it was, dude.
Right,
man. Come on, it was the kid who grew up in church and then turned 21 and went to college and just literally turned up every freaking set of shoes they had on a beer bong for the first time in their life, just tapping kegs. You know what I mean? Like you just go a little wild. And I went a little wild, like, because I mean, dude, the front face of my first website was me flipping off the camera saying, every one of your excuses will be greeted with the same finger. Like I just had something to prove. Like I'd never been able to just let loose, and I just let loose. Every other word was the F word. That was kind of like my thing. Like it was a lot of profanity. It was a lot of, I mean, just downright, honestly, almost bullying, just bullying people into this idea of polarity, because I understood marketing. And so I understood marketing from the church context of attraction marketing through this radical grace. So then I flipped it, and I said, cool, we're going to go for radical polarization. And that's how I'm going to market. And it felt really good, dude. I'm not going to lie. My ego loved it.
Yeah.
But what I recognized, dude, is like, one, I heard I was a youth pastor for like 10 years. Mm-hmm. I confused all my kids. They felt like they didn't even know me anymore. A lot of them unfollowed me. They were hurt, dude. Like they were so hurt.
Like parents you've lost it, you've backslidden all the church language. Like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah, it was just like Cody has lost his mind. In a lot of ways, I didn't lose my mind. I lost all care of what I thought the perception of people caring about me was, because I needed to, like, it's the true story of the prodigal. I just needed to go squander everything. I needed to go my own path. I needed to go. And thankfully I never got to the point where I was, eating from like the stables of the pigs, but I had to go away for a while. And what was really beautiful about the experience is like, there was a lot of humility in coming back to the church, but in the sense of like, is this me now? Like, am I the guy coming back? Is like, and Paul, who's my pastor, and everyone at my church community, like, they were the father who wrapped the robe, and that was really beautiful.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. That's like, oh, okay, acceptance. This is what that looks like, which can get really messed up in other church settings and stuff like that.
Totally.
But this, it's funny. And the reason I'm asking this, because I've known that about your story, obviously, just through social media and, coaching relationship. Yeah. But Melanie and I have kind of gone away from that. Like, we were like doing music 24/7 in our church for 10 years, mega church out here in Seattle and everything. Then that blew up, and the pastor it was a whole another shit show. But then we're just like, okay, whatever. And now we're finding ourselves in a different season. And it's almost like, we say this all the time with our coaching clients, we go to what we know. And I find that we're going back to intense prayer, intense and it's really beautiful. It's not like we
Yeah.
never, we didn't completely walk away or, turn our back on God or anything like that.
Sure.
But it's just so powerful and reassuring to some degree,
Yeah.
and it's just not like, it's just like speaks to your heart in a certain way. And of course we have all kinds of listeners, and we kind of frame it now as like, what's your higher power? What is guiding you to something different? You know what I'm saying? So especially
Sure.
with couples, when they're on the same page, like, okay, when you guys get in a fight and you get all triggered and stuff like that, what's going to bring you out? It's like Simon Sinek talks about, what's your why? Because if we know our why, we can do any how kind of thing. So we really like framing it like that. There was something else that I wanted to ask you.
A book that you should read together. So there's a book called A Spring Within Us. It's by Richard Rohr.
Mm-hmm.
It's the book of daily meditations, and it's beautiful. It's contemplative. It's got some Enneagram stuff in it. It blends all the things, but it's obviously faith-based. Like,
okay,
that's
good. Awesome. We'll include that in the notes. I've never heard of that book, but I'll definitely check it out. Okay, so one thing, when you were talking about how you were kind of like in the bullying phase, F this and F that, let's go, class and all this stuff. So I think a lot of guys like to hear that because it's like, yeah, okay, let's go, bench press 380 or whatever, which that's like,
which there is something to physical capability. Like, I'm all about, like, health is one of our pillars. So like, I want you to be physically capable and strong if that's within, capability of your physical nature, and that's a possibility. Yeah.
So what is the difference? Because it's weird. I'm a therapist, and we've talked about this, like going from a therapist to like the coaching. It's very different, right? And I know that I have achieved the greatest things in my life when somebody's pushing me, challenging me, kind of bringing me to that, right? And I really enjoy doing that with our coaching clients. What's the because I can fall into that really easy of like, come on, you got to kick everybody's ass in the thing, and you can do this and blow up the whole world, which that feels good.
Sure.
I'm not doing it out of ego because I struggle with the same stuff too. It's like, I don't want to wake up at 5 this morning. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do keto. I don't want to do this. But it's like, I need to hear that and get that kind of, not motivation because I know it's here, but just that kick in the ass reminder, like, oh, okay, yep, you're right. Let's go. Stop talking yourself out of it. So what is the balance that you found, like with some of your coaching clients in that? Where's the, like, okay, this person just needs to be completely heard right now and just seen, like, I see you, bro, rather than, okay, stop the bullshit, go get up and do it kind of thing.
Right.
What's that balance for you in that when you're coaching clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all completely contextual, right? So whether someone needs to be, have like a pretty strong, like, swift kick in the ass, or we need to slow down, we need to back up. So much of that comes down to the contextualization of where they're at and what they're up against, right? Like, if we're looking at, you even look at like the fear of something, right? Like, if we don't want to go do something simply because we're afraid because it's unknown, cool, we're going to push past that. And like, no, you're going to go do it, because if you want what you haven't had, you've got to do what you haven't done before. So no, we're going to put these frameworks in place. You're going to adhere to these habits. These are your daily non-negotiables. Like, this is what we're going to do. You're going to let me know when these things are done. And that's it, period, end of story, right? There's a different frame when we're afraid to do something because it's butting up against some sort of deep-seated trauma, and you can tell. Now, front-facing, most guys aren't going to know the difference. That's why having a coach or a mentor, a therapist, someone who is well-versed in being able to recognize certain patterns and certain triggers and certain ways in which you're going to respond to things, like, that's why that's so important. And that's also why so many people get, like, honestly, like, are worse off than when they started in some experiences with coaches and therapists, because so many are working out their own traumas in real time through their clients. So if they're not doing the work actively within themselves, again, what did we say about pain 5 minutes ago? If it's not transformed, it's transmitted. I don't care how good you think you are transferring trauma into them by trying to work out, no, you need to do this. You need to do this. Like, one of the things that I find to be interesting is, I'll talk to guys who have been through experiences of coaching where it is Navy SEAL style, like, intense shaming, hanging things around your neck of everything that you've done, blindfolding you, putting you in the mud in the ocean, all this like screaming in your face, like break you down to build you up.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what's really consistent with all of them? They all had, for the majority, really toxic, abusive fathers.
Mm.
And so the reason that nobody's talking about it. The reason that's so appealing to you is because you're looking for the person who's yelling at you to eventually give you confirmation that you never got before. And the only way that that works is if you experience the same trauma that you experienced as a kid. Is it useful? That's not how I coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that use. I mean, again, I think it can be. That's not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it takes all kinds, but understand we typically gravitate towards the thing that was traumatic to us. So for me, it's really taking a step back and looking at the motivators and the drivers, right? Like, why am I not wanting to do this thing? Is it because it's uncomfortable? Is it because it's creating a real trigger in me that's like pushing up against something that like I actually probably need to do some internal work on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if I just go try to confront it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to confront it with energy and anxiety and push movement forward, which is just another way of saying, man up, bury your shit and just move forward, put your boots on. That doesn't help anything. That just buries it deeper.
Right. So, I think we've had enough of that in kind of, how, I don't know, maybe some male culture going on. It's like, that's not helpful. Right. And I can say that as a coach, just as a regular dude, and also as a therapist, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're having to unlearn all this stuff. Right.
Right.
But then also really appreciating like what real masculinity is and how different that is from the feminine energy and the masculine energy is like, oh man, that's so crazy. And when we look at it different, not in that like toxic kind of, man up kind of thing mindset, it's like, those types of men who I am talking about are a billion times stronger than those other dudes who are just like,
exactly. Like, again, everything is contextual. Like, you've done the work.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're thrusting someone into something they've never experienced before, and they don't have the emotional capacity to be able to process what you've spent decades processing.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Like,
so,
you can't wrap all that up into a few days.
No, it's 90 days, 6 months. We do 90-day coaching. But oftentimes we're like, hold on, we're just getting started at 90 days. Sometimes clients don't want to hear that, but it's like, okay, you make that investment, you have skin in the game. If you actually do want to take the island, you got to burn all the boats, not give yourself the option of like, okay, I'm going to slink back here, because that's what you've been doing, for 30 years, for 40 years, however old you are. And one thing I really like to say about coaching is we all think, especially men, I'll just listen to a podcast or listen to a book, or not even do those things. And I'll just white knuckle this thing until I die to prove what? I don't know, nothing. We think we can do it alone, but if we would have done it, if we could have done it, guess what? You would have done it by now. You would have done it by now. Oh, I'll just read another book. No, you won't. Well, yeah, you'll read another book, but you'll still be thinking, well, let me go to that conference, or let me listen to this new podcast, or do this. No, we need help. We need accountability. We need that pushing and coaching. So I want to talk briefly, and I'll be mindful of your time here, about the physical routine. Like, what is your either maybe current, I know kind of, we all go through like, okay, I'm hitting it hard for 90 days or whatnot, but what is your current kind of physical regimen? Anything from self-care, meditation, reading, water, what time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed? What does that look like for you right now?
Yeah. And mine's been fairly consistent for a while. So I'm typically at between 3:45 and 4. And that's not because like, I think it's some magic number. I just have gotten up at that time for a long time, just because it takes me a while to work through my routine. And that's where it made sense. Mm-hmm. And some people would quote unquote say they're not a morning person. Like, I am. Like, I'm the guy that since I was a kid, when I wake up, I'm ready. Like, I am literally a squirrel on Adderall. I am just ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't even matter if I got an hour of sleep. When I don't have an alarm, I just wake up at the same time, and it's just a thing. Now, granted, I'll fall asleep at 7 p.m.,
mm-hmm.
but
right. Yeah. That was my other question. Like, when do you hit?
Yeah. When I stop, like typically around, 10 o'clock, like I'm done for the night. Mm-hmm. But so I wake up, I'll drink a couple glasses of water. I'll usually drink a greens drink, like First Form or something. Hashtag not an ad.
I know,
And
right?
yeah, then I'll come back, and the first thing I do is I think of 3 things that I'm grateful for, and I spend a couple minutes just really in gratitude, and then I pray. And I pray for myself. I pray for my family. I pray for my friends. I pray for the people that I know. I pray for the people that I don't. And then I spend time in the Word. And when I'm spending time in the Word, I'm also writing. So every morning I write a sermon, and I keep those in comp books. And what's interesting is, like, I'm not a pastor anymore, but I'm reading the Word with fresh eyes now, in the ways in which, like, I want my son to hear it from a man who's been through some things in his life now. And so one day I'll give him all those comp books.
Wow. That's cool.
And so when I'm done with that, I take a look over my day. And so I make sure there's nothing glaring at me in my inbox, or that any of my team, because we've got a team of 12 now. And so making sure that, like, there's nothing glaring that needs to be addressed before I hit the gym. So then I hit the gym. That's going to be a combination of your standard bro lifts, like back and buys and chest and tries and legs and abs and core. And then I also incorporate a lot of circuit training and hit style training. So I am 37, so I don't pretend like I'm 20 anymore. But that to say, I'm a really big believer in making sure that from a physiological standpoint, we're at our peak. So every client that I have, I make sure that they get all their labs done. So make sure that your testosterone, your estrogen, your cortisol, your blood count, and that everything is where it needs to be. And so for me, like, when you talk about protocol, I'm a guy that's on TRT. I've been on TRT for years, ever since 2016 when I went through hormonal shutdown. It just never rebounded. So that helps me with my performance in the gym. And so I typically work out for about an hour and a half, and it is intense. I mean, there's a lot of days that, like, I'll push myself to throwing up, and it's not because of the ego. It's just, I'm an athlete, and I just want to know that I gave it my all. After that, I come back, typically listen to a podcast on my way back, and take a shower, make some breakfast. That's going to be a high protein, high fat breakfast, no carbs. Eat, usually down 3 or 4 more glasses of water, take my morning supplements, and then I start into my day, and I take, my first call right around 8:30 or 9.
Okay. That's awesome. So we had Hal Elrod on the show a couple of weeks ago, right? Miracle Morning guy is awesome, and I was just, wait a minute, you're hitting all the savers acronyms, right? Scribing, I can't think of it, but like journaling, meditation, prayer, exercise, water, visualization, all this stuff. You're hitting that, right? So what do you do? Like, what can you tell kind of covertly me, but really our listeners, okay, when you are off of something, or you're like, I don't want to wake up, like, is there anything that you just kind of, or maybe you're not even thinking that way because you've been in the same routine for so long, but when you're like, oh man, I'm kind of not feeling it, worked out yesterday, threw up yesterday. What do you say to yourself there?
I woke up, and even if I'm tired, I'll throw a scoop of pre-workout in a shaker, and I'll drink it. And within 15 minutes, I'm good to go, right? Enough. Because again, while I say I wake up every morning bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, which for the most part I do, there are mornings that I'm off, right? I'm not superhuman. But I recognize that one, like, every morning I ask the same question: what needs to die in me to become the man that I said that I would be? And what that means is that my complacency has to die. And so if I'm a product of my word, and if I say I'm going to do something and I'm going to hold myself accountable to that, then that means that I have to get up. Because I also recognize that there are people that can't get up. There are people that don't get up. And the only thing that separates me from the person that's going to go further than me is that they're going to get up and they're going to start moving, and I didn't, so they got a head start. And so this isn't a conversation of me trying to prove anything to anyone else. Like, I don't have anything to prove anyone at this point, right? This is just an inner conversation, an inner promise that I made to myself that, listen, like, you've been given a real gift here in this life, and treat it as such. Again, like, I give myself a little bit of leeway, because in the mornings before I go to the gym, like, I'm reading, I'm writing, I'm able to then kind of, again, my pre-workout will kick in. Like, I'm able to wake up, and I'm able to get active enough to the point that by the time, 6 o'clock rolls around, I'm ready for the gym.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned diet. Are you doing keto, slow carb, zero carb? What works best for you?
Yeah. I mean, I just try to not eat shit. Right. So Yeah, I just tried.
Do that diet. Don't eat shit.
I'm like, just don't eat like an asshole,
right.
And drink lots of water. So for me, it means that everything is probably going to be either meat or it's going to come from the earth. I don't really eat anything that's processed, so you can call it more of like a paleo. I am pretty limited on carbs. The only carbs that I'm typically going to eat are going to be something like sweet potatoes. I don't do any bread. I don't do any dairy, and it's simply like the bread just sits on me weird. I don't like rice because it makes me bloated. I don't feel good.
Yeah.
And I don't drink milk because I've never understood why you would drink an animal's breast milk. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. It never did. So, that's it for me. I try to drink as much water. I've been drinking through this whole conversation. The glass is empty. Like I'm constantly drinking water.
Yeah.
And so all of us have nervous tics. I've turned my nervous tic into drinking water.
Nice.
I mean, it's useful. So
yeah, I have where is it? Right here. It's my half-gallon giant ass water bottle.
There it is.
Put a little dose of apple cider vinegar in there, and
so I take ACV pills 3 times a day.
Okay, yep, right on. It's so good, right? So that's all right, amazing. I want to wrap this up here. So tell me one thing. You're saying please wrap it up.
No, not please wrap it up.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we can go all day, man.
So tell me one thing that it doesn't matter what space it's in, or we haven't even talked about it. What is one thing right now that is bringing you like jazz? Like, man, yeah, I'm just into RC car racing or anything like that. What is one thing that you're like, I love this right now? What is that for you?
Co-parenting.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned like I had been married, got divorced when I was in the church. I recently, within the past year, went through another divorce, and one of the really, and that's that always, it's good in ways and it sucks in ways. But one of the things that's been really healing over the last several months is being able to reconnect with my co-parents and to be able to do life together and live life together and to be able to partner in how we raise our son together. And so again, when we talk about if you don't transform it, you transmit it. Again, like I love my parents. I think they're great. They didn't talk when I was a kid. There was literally growing up, there was never a time when I was a kid. Now granted, for part of this, my mother moved away. They've never sat down at a table together. I've never had dinner with my parents. I've never been to an event with my parents. We've never, literally in my life, I've never sat down with both my parents.
Wow.
In the same room. And I was creating that. I was creating that. I was literally transferring that trauma and creating scenarios that didn't exist to justify a concept in my mind of what I thought was normal. Right. And being able to then through the hard work of therapy and understanding patterns and understanding, where things are healthy and where things aren't, have been able to then through a lot of humility and a lot of grace, be able to come back into that situation and to be able to heal wounds. And, I don't want to speak for her, my son's mom, like her scenario was the same. Her biological dad and mom, they never sat down. They were never together, never.
Wow. And
so for us, there's been so much healing in that for all of us. And again, I don't even want my son's stepdad was the same. He didn't know his dad growing up. And the fact that we all get to do this together, and the fact that like most guys like hate the stepdad, and I was celebrating him last weekend, all weekend, as his kids, his high school basketball team went to state and got state runner up. Like I was at every game. And to be able to have that kind of camaraderie and bond, like there's so much that's being healed in me, but that also is creating the experience that I always wanted from, like, I'll get emotional, that I always wanted for my son.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy that the work that you did individually, like doing things like building your confidence, becoming the man that you want to be, now is translating into a healthy relationship for your son? Because if you were like crazy jealous or weird or insecure about yourself,
just creating toxicity, just creating toxicity in the conversation. Like a year and a half ago, we couldn't communicate outside of attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're doing the work, right? And so you're not all weird. So, you can have a good relationship to make it easier for your kid, like emotionally, physically, like everything. So it's like that just hit me really interestingly. Get right. And then other stuff around you will get right.
Everything, dude. If you've watched over the last few months of like the trajectory of my career, it's been insane.
Yeah.
And it's the healthier the healthier that we get, the more, opportunity presents itself, and the more then we're open to then receive it and not be afraid of it and step full in again to the promise of purpose that's laid out for us, right? And so recognizing even 20 years ago when I was in ministry and I didn't know what I was doing, that pulpit was always preparation for the platform that was planned for me. It all had to happen in the way that it did. And so listeners, like, I think what I'd leave you with is that, like, instead of everything like, oh, all this happened to me, like it all had to happen this way. It all had to, and some of it's unfortunate, some of it's traumatic, some of it's tragic, and some of it is really hard to reconcile. And some of it can't be reconciled, but you're here. And so your story wouldn't be what it is without it. And so we can try to reconcile what things would have been like, romanticizing a past that never existed, right? But all we do is we keep ourselves stuck in a frame that we can't break out of. And so changing it to, it all had to happen. My buddy JC Keneally, the coach JC, he says this, it all had to happen. And that life isn't happening, it's not happening to you, it's all happening for you.
Right. Yeah. I could say a bunch of other stuff, but I'll leave it at that, right? Get in that mindset. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yeah.
The sooner we get that, the sooner we can actually go to where we want to go, right? So, Cody, my man, tell our listeners where they can go to find anything you want them to find.
Oh, I mean, the easiest place to find me is on social media, and that's where I find everybody. So Cody_Jefferson on Instagram, Cody Jefferson on Facebook. I mean, I feel like everybody's got a story. And I'm a guy who's made his whole living off of his ability to tell stories. And so I would love to hear yours. So please just shoot me a message. Would love to connect with you if this resonates, to put your favorite point in your stories or something, and we'll reshare it. It'd be fun.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, and I appreciate it. Not only this time, but the coaching stuff as well. Thanks, man.
Really proud of you.
Thanks, man. Thanks. All right, bro. We'll talk to you later.
All right.